Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Getting Started with Leather with Cien Fuegos. Cien is an excellent leather worker, makes the coolest, most beautiful stuff, also makes really cool weapons, and just all kinds of great stuff. Um, we'll be learning about how to get started with leather and only $150, which, as a beginning leather worker, is just pretty excellent. Um, and we'll learn about what to practice and how to get the most out of your time and your material. And we ask that everybody stays muted. Unless you have a question, feel free to butt in, raise your hand. You can post questions or comments in the chat, and I will make sure that they are heard. Um, yeah, and then you can take it away, Cian.
All right, very good. Hey, thanks everybody for coming. What I'd like to do with this class is just kind of help people understand that you can get into leather, because a lot of times when you think about getting into leather, you think, oh, I mean, it's thousands of dollars. You've got to have thousands of dollars worth of tools and equipment and things like that, and the materials are expensive. Leather is not the cheap material to work with, but if you take the chance and do things, it is a very durable material though, so you can do things and it's fairly forgiving. If you make a mistake and do things like that, you can usually fix it. Unless you cut it in half, then you can't fix it there. But you can sew it together, you can rivet it together, you can do a lot of things to make it a little bit better. So what I'd like to do is say, okay, hey, if somebody is wanting to get started, what started me into leather, I was already a foam smith. I'd done some things like that. I came to my very first bell event, and Cora was there, and I said, "Hey, your armor is so cool. Where did you get it?" He said, "I made it," and a little switch popped in my head that said, "Oh, you can make that." And so, from that point forward, it's really been, yes, this is something I can do. If you're wanting to just make some armor, if you want to make yourself a breastplate, a realmate of mine just made a breastplate himself. He said, I punched it out. I had some leather. I got it done, and it's a nice little piece. There, it's not fancy, it's not finished by any means, but it's done, and that's a lot of times he dove in, and he'll do better, and he'll improve it and other things that way. So really, in just getting started, I'm going to assume that you're a crafter of one kind or another, and you've got a mat. You've got pens and markers and rulers and things like that. You've got some containers for dyes. That you've got some paper and cardboard and things like that around to make patterns. There, that's what you're going to have for really anything that you do. First thing that you're going to need, after you have those things to make a pattern and things, first thing that you need is a knife. And you don't need to go out and buy a $200 head knife. You start looking at some of these websites and things, and you go to Tandy Leather, and you can buy a Barry King head knife, for $200. And it's super cool. It's Damascus steel. It's beautiful. Everything else, but honestly, you need a $5 utility knife. That'll get you. That'll get you going. That'll get you. That'll do everything what it is. This is a snap-off knife. I actually got into that other class and didn't have everything in here, but I have actually used this particular snap-off knife, this same blade, for probably the last 10 leather projects. I did change it about 7-8 months ago, but this actually works really well. I rarely snap the blade off. I just strop the blade. Um, that keeps the blade super sharp. You can use a whetstone or a sharpener and other things that way, so that you're not really burning through blades. So the cost of blades is really pretty small. You can make a strop with a piece of leather and a little bit of stropping compound. Really not a terrible thing, but it keeps that blade nice and sharp and nice and polished, so it'll move through things. But it works really, really well. That's one thing that you'd need if you're going to make some basic armor. Is that another thing is some kind of a punch, something to punch holes, because you're going to need to cut the leather in a way. You're going to need to punch holes in a way. You can buy a little punch set like this for $10. 10, 15 bucks. It's got 5, 6 different sizes of front end on it there, so that you can punch the right size for the right hole that you're going to use for a rivet or a Chicago screw or a post. Anything that you're going to do really makes a pretty easy thing. Can everybody see okay? Because I don't have a monitor for myself.
Yeah, we do see well. And you also got a raised hand from
Oh,
WM Salt Hale.
sure.
Sorry, that was I wasn't watching your screen. I was wondering if the slides were supposed to be advancing, but then I noticed that you're on video, so sorry about that.
Oh, sure. No worries, no worries. So you can get a punch like that. You can also get a punch like this for about $10 there. It's a rotary punch, so the same size holes in the front, and it just rotates through so that you can have different sizes that go, and you can punch through just about anything. The limitation of these on different pieces is how far in you need to go. So obviously you only have, an inch and a half somewhere there that you can actually reach into punch. So this kind of a punch works really well. This is actually the first tool that I replaced, and we'll talk about replacing tools later. This is the first tool that I replaced. I replaced it with a loud bang. I replaced it with something that actually augments your squeeze there, because this, if you're working with like 5 or 6 ounce leather with thinner stuff, this works great. You can punch through it really easily, things like that. You get into the 12 and the 14 ounce leather, and hand punching through that, it's a struggle. And so this actually compounds your force and really, really works well. This was like 35 bucks. Like I said, this is the first tool I've ever replaced to say, hey, this is a better tool than this, even though they're basically the same tool. But is it a necessity? No, it isn't, because you can also use a drill, especially with the thicker leather. If you're working with the 12, 14 ounce leather that you're going to use for armor, you can use a drill and a drill bit. The thing you want to make sure you do when you do that is back it up so that as you push through, you're pushing into something new. So just back it with some scrap leather or a block of wood or something that you're going, just don't punch it through, because otherwise it really deforms that hole and can tear things out, whatever else. Just like you would if you're drilling a hole through wood. Very much so. With these tools right here, you can make a set of armor as long as you have a hammer, right? You probably ought to have a hammer, because you need to be able to pound your rivets or do whatever else with a hammer. But with these tools, you can make a really simple set of armor. The next step that I would say in saying, okay, hey, let's make this armor so that it's going to last a little better and do some things, is to finish your edges. But before we go there, I skipped over with the hammer. You always want to make sure that you're not using a metal hammer with your metal tools. A lot of your leatherworking tools, if you're punching like the back end of this punch, if you use a metal hammer on it, it'll mushroom the end of that punch, and you'll end up, instead of having this tool last for 20 years or so, and having a nice head on it and things like that, you will mushroom that out if you use a metal hammer in days. They're in very, very short order, and then it just gets sharp. It doesn't work quite as well. It's going to break, and you take some chances of just destroying the tool. So always the poly type hammers. They make them out. You can get them Bakelite. You can get them some kind of a polycarbonate, whatever it is there, and it does wear out. So eventually you do these. This is probably the next tool that I'll replace, going to a little bigger hammer, and probably, rather than a hammer, a maul. You look at it and say, why would I hit with a stick basically instead of a hammer? But it does index a little bit better for you to be able to get a correct hit every time with a maul. But again, something, you're going to spend a little bit on one of these poly hammers. $15 for something really simple like this. You can spend up to $30 for a heavier maul. This is like 12 ounces. I would go 16 or 20 ounces for things, even a little bit heavier, just to make sure that you're you're getting some weight behind it for that. For your edge finishing, one thing that you'll want to pick up through that is an edge beveler. And the edge beveler is a really simple tool. They run about $9-10. You don't need to buy the whole set, because when you get in and you're looking, oh, you can buy the whole set. You can buy a set of 4 for $35. And this is where leatherworking gets expensive, especially for people like me, because I see it and say, oh, well, I'll save $5 on this one tool. The difference is you usually only use, if you're working with a heavier leather, you're going to use a 3 or a 4 all the time. That's just how big this little bevel is. So it's just basically like a little round knife to cut off the corner of the leather all the way around. Essentially, if you're working with that heavier leather and things, you really only need, like I said, the 3 or the 4. If you buy that whole set, all of a sudden you've spent $35 and you may never ever use a number 1 because you're not working with that light of leather. But eventually you buy all of them and you have a drawer full of different ones and different things. But really, to finish the edges on a piece of armor grade leather, this number, I want to say this is number 4. Number 4 is what you need, and it just cuts off the corner, rounds that corner off for you. We'll talk about why and how in a minute. But so here's another $10 that you can spend getting into things, finishing edges as well. You want a stick, one of these round dowel sticks. It's called an edge slicker, and they run about $10. The only reason that you'd ever buy a second one is if you work in lighter leather, because they do tend to pick up a lot of dye as you're finishing that edge. You generally get a little bit of dye on it, and it'll dye the next thing, because that's how dye works. It'll dye the next thing that you're working on, and that can be messy, or if you want it to be some honey-colored piece of leather, then it is something that's there. So with that little pile of tools and $40 or $50 spent, you can really get started in working on some really basic armor and really basic things that you want to do. You can make other things too with this simple set of tools. Do you have any questions at this point in time before we go to the next? What's the next set of things that you need if you're wanting to get started a little bit happier?
Nothing in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands.
Any raised hands? All right. Well, as you get started, going in that direction, if you want to carve or make things happier, do anything else, the next things that you would want to pick up in your carving or making some decorations to things, first thing that you'd want or need is a swivel knife. This is a $10 swivel knife from Tandy. It's probably the only swivel knife I'll ever have, because I'm not, again, like the super expensive head knife and things like that. This works extremely well. You might change the blade out to a little thinner blade. The blades are about $10 a piece, but they're interchangeable with things. And it's essentially built to work in your fingers and be able to make tight corners and keep a nice straight line while you're able to put pressure down on it here in the little saddle. So it works really, really nicely. The blade that's on this, the properties of the blade, it's a fairly wide geometry. So it cuts the leather and kind of opens it up in a big V shape. And that's really what you want it to do in order to have the leather be something that's going to stand out, have something stand up and be there to be that. Again, this blade, you don't need to replace blades. You don't ever really need to sharpen this blade. You just want to strop it, which is just basically rubbing it on leather. You can rub it on any piece of leather, and it does a pretty good job. If you put the stropping compound on or a polishing compound on, it does a really, really nice job. And it's amazing the difference. You'll cut along and think, oh, maybe I'll strop, and then you strop, and then you start cutting again, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is so... Why do I ever forget to do this after every 12, 15 inches of cutting that I've done, just to make sure that it's nice and smooth to do things with your swivel knife. Something that you probably want is going to be a modeling tool of one kind or another. This is a combination that I picked up at a craft store. It's got a little spoon on one end that I use all the time to finish my cutting and carving and things, and it's got a little stylus on the other end. It's really awesome because this stylus is actually bent off a little bit. I don't know what happened to it in the manufacturing process, but the ball is not necessarily on the end. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it is right there. The stylus is something that's nice as you're putting patterns down, as you're saying, hey, this is the thing that I want to have on the leather. This draws on the leather really, really well, and it doesn't get it dirty or stain it permanently like a marker would. Even if you use a pencil, you still get some graphite and other things like that around. This actually will, the leather, we'll see it here in a minute, this will mark the leather and not give you any kind of a problem with that. So it's kind of a dual purpose thing. You can use it to push things down and keep things where they need. The other things that you would want if you're carving will be thousands of different tools. I mean, you can go to the Tandy catalog and have all kinds of stamps. This is a catalog, kids. You can go online with Tandy. I like the catalog because it helps you find sets a little bit easier of all kinds of things, all kinds of just different ways to finish things, stamps for, certain things, as well as carving and cutting different things. But there you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars. The first tool that I had that I built the majority of things with, I had a couple of tools. One is just an edge beveler. It comes into the edge after you've cut it, and it's nice and smooth, and it's going to push one side down at a little bit of an angle and leave it as is. You can get these smooth. You can get them with all kinds of different patterns on them. This one has a little bit of a background pattern on it. This is kind of cool because it is nice and smooth finish. This is kind of cool because it gives you a finish that's going to capture dye in different levels and give you some depth and other things that way. You can have others that are more aggressive. If you can see this has a whole bunch of really deep points on it, and it makes a big difference between those. But in the beginning, hey, that smooth one works really well. If you like the patterned one, if you're picking up smaller things to say, all right, hey, I want to get into small spaces and be really detailed, they come smaller as well. You just want to make sure that you get the same series if you're going to have any kind of pattern on them. Get the same pattern so that things match up. Because matching is always good. And that's where you can get into some expenses. All right, hey, I need this, and then I need the medium-sized one, and I need the smallest one. Honestly, the medium-sized ones, if you're going to leave anything out of your equipment, leave that medium-sized one out. They're very seldom do you need it. Usually you want the big one because you're going to cover more area with it, and you'll use a small one to get into little corners and little spaces. The other one that I used making a lot of my own personal armor is just a pear shape beveler. This is actually for making flowers, like Western type flowers and things like that. But you can also use it in a lot of different ways to give some texture and other things. Because it'll push the leather down on a nice round little dome. You can make it fairly round, or you can make it very pear shaped. You can use the little end or the big end right there. These, of course, come in different sizes, and they, of course, have the different shading on them built into the tool. But that works really very well. The one other thing that I would say, if you're wanting to do some things that start to look a little nicer, is some type of a background tool. And a background tool is going to be something like this. It's just got a pattern and a background. They're crosshatched. This actually just looks like pebbles or bubbles, and it's got different levels within it there to do some different things. Again, necessary, or not something that's necessary to have, but it's something that can start making things look a little bit nicer and being a little more creative in what you're doing for things. But some kind of backgrounding tool to work with. Honestly, this little guy can come in and hide mistakes that you make. If you cut a little bit too far, or you bevel a little bit differently, or maybe the beveling isn't super smooth in a spot, and you get into that. Hey, if you bevel along that edge, that super smoothness becomes not an issue because it all looks like these little pebbles there. So usually that backgrounding is kind of used to hide things a little bit on that note. For the surface that you're working on, if you're going to be punching or doing any kind of work that involves stamping or punching or doing anything like that, you'll want something hard to have it work on. You want a sturdy work surface, but something hard. What I have here is actually a little tabletop for a little plant table that fortuitously fell over at the right time to break the chip out of the corner, and my wife say, we need to throw that away. And I said, hey, I'm just starting leather work. I bought with my original Tandy stuff when I first got started. I bought a little tiny square for like $15. They'll give you a little tiny square of granite, and that's okay. But it's hard to work on something that's this big on this little tiny piece of granite. It's painful a little bit. This cost me obviously nothing other than just popping it off the top of the tabletop and throwing the table away for that. And it works really well. You just need something solid and heavy to kind of reciprocate that blow and make sure that it just goes there. It also keeps things fairly quiet. You don't ever want to punch through on this if you're using your punch tool. You don't want to do that on the hard surface. One, you're going to mar up your hard surface. It's nice when it's nice and smooth. I've made a lot of stuff on this. This is the only problem. But you don't want to use your punch through it. Generally speaking, you'll want some kind of plastic to punch through. The self-healing mat like this does okay with punches, but this is a kind of a deadly thing to those. I've seen those on other leatherworking benches that just have millions of these little circles all in them. And that poor little mat's not self-healing very well anymore. This is actually the corner of a cutting board. I have a full cutting board that I've cut into about 5 different pieces. I have this built so that I can fit it in on my anvil and be able to get it in small places to be able to set rivets and punch holes in places that it doesn't fit to be on a bigger cutting board. So I've got a big cutting board, I've got this little guy, and I've got a little tiny chunk of it as well, just to get in place that I'm not going to mess up my punch if I happen to be punching through or setting rivets or doing anything else that way, where you want it kind of a semi-hard thing. This is a dollar store cutting board there, and it'll last forever for what it is. To do that. The other place that you can get these, if you don't have a plant stand that falls over and breaks and your wife says throw it out, if you don't have these, a really good place to get a nice piece of marble or granite is a countertop store. The places that do hard surface countertops. So if they're doing marble or granite and it's in a kitchen or in a bathroom, they are going to cut out a sinkhole in the middle of it, in the middle of that granite. And guess what they do with the part that they cut out of the sink? They can't put it in any place else. They can't ever use it anywhere else. They throw it in the garbage. It doesn't cost them anything to hand it to you. So the very best place to find yourself a nice piece of marble or granite like this is at a countertop store, countertop shop that is cutting out sinkholes and throwing things away. Sometimes they're broken, sometimes they're in one piece. So if you want something that's a nice aesthetic, you can say, hey, can I get a countertop sink cut out of this? Are you cutting anything like that today? And most of them will say, sure. And they'll know exactly what you're there for because leather workers are always looking for that. I've seen people use headstones that have mistakes on them. I'm not sure that I'd want that in my shop. Bad omens and all kinds of things that way, because I like my projects to live a little better. But once you've got that, once you've got this basic little set of tools, you're ready to get started. And if you keep kind of a running tally of what it is, we're right around $100, 120 bucks, depending on what you do. You can pick up other little tools that are super helpful. If you want to cut straps, if you need to cut straps, when cow comes to you, it does not come in nice squares most of the time. You can pay a lot. Don't pay for square things. But if you want straps, you need to get a straight line on that. And then if you want to spend a whole bunch of time with a ruler and hold it down and make your nice perfect cuts, you can get a nice straight strap out of that. That is not how I cut this strap. This strap is cut with just a strap cutter. Really simple little tool. It's got a gauge on one side that you can slide. It'll go up to a little over 4 inches of a strap and down to, really, really tiny. That way, I don't know that you'd ever really cut a strap that small, but most of the time you're in 1.5 inches to 2 inches of strap that you've got. And it works really, really nicely to cut a nice straight strap. As long as you've got a straight edge on your leather to begin with, you can cut that strap really very easily there, and it pulls through with just this. Very simple tool. They run about $15 or $20. The Woodcraft tool and works really well. Buy a pack of blades with it. Again, I'm a stropping blade kind of person. I like to do that. It's got a little razor blade built that's just pinched in here. There you take the screws out and then lets you take the razor blade back out. But I actually strop that razor blade and put it back in, and it works like a champ. Again, it's not dull. I've taken actually stropping to a really high level in that the blade in my cricket, I have taken out and stropped and put it back in, and I don't need to buy another blade for the cricket suddenly there. So it works really, really well the way that you can get that and make a little more life out of that blade. Keeps costs down in a lot of ways. So this little guy saves you a lot of time. You just need to start with a straight edge. If you don't start with a straight edge, you'll do that. You can also buy straps. They're fairly expensive, and you get what it is. With this, you can make a strap as long as you need for what you want. You can even make a strap different sizes and have it be really the same piece of leather, depending on how it goes. Any questions as we sit? Because I can talk and talk and talk.
I don't see anything or any hands.
Okay. All right. Well, what I want to do then, as I've covered tools, you can get started in this, and you really don't need anything else. As you go, the next thing that you've got to do is practice. You've got to start doing the things that you have. You don't want to go out and buy $150 half hide of cow to get started on things, and you don't necessarily need to get started on really, really thick leather right at the very beginning. Best spot to get started is just a scrap. In the beginning, I bought just a bag of veg tan scraps. You want veg tan, you don't want chrome tan. If you're doing this, the chrome tan doesn't take any stamps. It's usually stretchy because the tanning process is different. It's not the strong leather like we're looking at for leather armor or for a lot of other things that way. It's what you're going to find on your couch. It's what you're going to find in a lot of clothing and bags and things like that is all going to be chrome tanned leather. The vegetable tan leather works a little bit better, and you can buy a bag of scrap for that. Really pretty inexpensively. Buy the bag of scrap. It'll come with a bunch of weird ends. It'll have weird spots on it where it's been cut out. But a lot of times you'll see little hook marks. This is where they've hung it up to dry there. So this dried with this little impression in it. And that's kind of where it is. You'll see brands in it. You'll see scars. It's really kind of cool. Start working with leather, you can see kind of what the cow went through in its life, in scars and other things like that. But you can get it just a piece of leather, a bag of leather to get started with and doing things. And after that, you're going to make your own scraps and things to practice on. And practicing is important. Just like if you're doing any other kind of art, your studies on things are going to be extremely important to you. You're going to want to get things as good as you can through those studies and through that practice. And so with this, hey, we've got just something here. I don't know what we're going to necessarily build into this, but we're going to take a look at how some of these tools work and what they do. First thing that I would want to do with this, we'll move our block really quick. First thing that we'd want to do is kind of clean up the edge, because this is an edge that you're not going to get cleaned very well or have very much done. And whee! Everybody enjoy that ride? Sorry about that. If we want to start with a nice clean edge with things, we just find, right, here's where this middle is. As you cut leather, you don't need to cut all the way through it in one pass. This is about a 6 or 7 ounce leather, and so it doesn't take a lot to cut through it, but you want to go through it in a nice, in several passes. When you get into the 12 and 14 ounce leather that you're going to use to build armor with, you'll take 5, 6, 7, 10 passes. You just want to make sure that your ruler stays nice and still, and that you are keeping your blade, instead of at a high angle like this, you want to keep your blade at a pretty low angle. That low angle is going to prevent it from taking different directions. It's going to help you keep it right on that straight edge, and it'll help you keep from jumping into things. If you're ever cutting and you're wanting to keep something on this side, turn it around and cut away from your project. Don't cut into the project, because again, cutting the leather is probably one of the few things that you can make a mistake and say, oh wow, hey, here's the end of this. I can't fix that in very many ways. And that's something that, okay, hey, we want to make sure that we're getting that taken care of. We're not really worried about square edges or a square corner here, but I did want to find us a little bit of a straight edge. And now we've got something that's nice and square, a little bit easier to work with. It's kind of like getting material, and the nice person at the store that was talking to you while they cut the material out gave you this nice straight line. It's kind of like that, but it was the cow that gave you this non-straight line there, because that's how its skin fit to its body. So it works out. Just to show you, this is how you'd cut a strap if you haven't used a strap cutter before. These little things. We'll cut a 3/4 inch strap really quick. So you set your line to right there. Your blade's over here. You'll slide it in between, and you'll actually just kind of push and slide at the very beginning until you get enough out to grab a hold of, and then you grab a hold of this end, and it holds itself. Really kind of cool. It holds itself to the thing, and you get a nice straight little strap in just a moment. And a strap like this, 3-foot strap like a 3-foot strap like this will cost you a whole bunch. You can make a whole bunch if you need them for that. Whenever I get down to straps, I cut little straps out of them, because this will make a weapon holder. It'll make something you can wrap a handle with, all kinds of different things that way, for just little scraps, little things to do. So that's your strap cutter. Keeps things really pretty simple. Now we have a nice edge right here. Let's take a look at our edge beveling, what that does for us. This is a pretty light leather, so I'm going to actually change because it's the scrap that I picked up out of the bin. I'm going to change to a little lighter edge beveler because, you know, after you get one, then you get a whole bunch. So here's a number 3 that'll fit a little bit better for it. And if we look, this edge is pretty square. And what's going to happen if you don't cut this edge is as you live in this leather and the things happen, you're going to bump on this edge and bump on this edge. Right now it's really clean and really crisp because we just cut it. But as you live, you're going to, the fibers and the parts of the leather that are layers in here are going to get peeled off, and they're going to get peeled up on the edges. If you look at really rough leather, a lot of times it's going to have this edge not done. If you look at leather that's survived really well and that lasts a little bit better, the edge is going to be treated in one way or another to help it be better. So what we're going to do is actually round that corner off really simply. I like to do this dry. There are people who do it cased or wet. And there we just took off a little tiny bit. And now we've got a little bit of a different geometry to this. We've got a little bit of a ridge down the middle of it, but we've got a nice edge that's going to keep things from catching, and we'll do a little more to it to protect it. There are 2 ways you can put this together. If you're going to be layering this on top of another piece like this, you wouldn't bevel the other side because you want that to stick together and be nice and flat and not have anything else. If it's going to be an edge all by itself, if this is the end of a shoulder or the bottom of a breastplate or anything, I would certainly turn it over and bevel this other side. Take this other little edge out of it. And as you can see, even the flesh side comes nice and smooth and clean there to do that. And now we've got kind of a rounded edge on this. It's a little more of a triangle, but a rounded edge for this. And we'll work on this a little bit more. That's not the end of it. This is just the first thing that we're going to do to keep that edge in a little bit better shape. The next thing that we would do is get that wet. I'm going to do that over my garbage can because otherwise I got water all over the desk. Just a spray bottle, dollar spray bottle, dollar store spray bottles, fine. You can get the leather wet, and with your slicking tool, you choose the groove that's going to fit the best for that, and you're going to rub. And you don't have to be a big, strong guy, and you don't have to rub it super hard. You just need heat and friction, actually, just that friction to build up some heat and get things done. And this helps to start finishing the edge. You can also put other products on it like this. I've just put water on here, but you can put gum tragacanth, you can put toconol, you can use saddle soap, you can use, which has a lot of wax in it. You can use beeswax. All kinds of different things. If you want to be super period, you can just use wax and do things. But this is, you know, like I said, it's a $10 tool, and you'll use it forever because it never really ever gives a problem. And you can see that we're kind of dyeing it because we're getting a little bit of water in the black dye that's on here already. But if we look at this now, we've spent just a minute or 2 rubbing on it. This is getting to be nice and smooth. You can see a little bit right here that's bumping up. And there I'm going to go to the next groove up and go a little bit of an angle and rub on it. I'm not rubbing hard. I'm not bending the leather over. I'm just moving it back and forth, warming it up. And what it actually does as you do that, as you heat that leather, it plastifies it. So it changes the bonds in the leather. So these edges start to say, okay, hey, we need to stick together a different way. We've been heated up, and we're going to stick together a little different way. And that will make the edge of your armor, the edge of a strap, the edge of your belt stick together and stay in a whole bunch better shape than it will if you don't. I usually do this step as I'm dyeing. I will put some dye on. I'll put my gum tragacanth on, which is what I usually use for the stronger edges, and then I'll slick it because it does bind this down a little bit. If we were to dye this piece, this is going to dye a little bit differently than this. So I usually do this part of the process right during dyeing so that we have the same color on that edge versus on the other side, if that makes sense. The whole tool can be used as well. If you've got a little spot that's popping up there, you can rub on it a little bit. You can use it depending on how fleshy the back of your the back is. You can actually push down and rub here. This is pretty fleshy stuff, so it isn't going to give us very much, and it's hard to see, but it's easier that you can feel the difference. We've actually laid those fibers down. If you've got it all wet, maybe have a little bit of wax in there with it, you can push that down and get that taken care of. You can also use a little bit of sandpaper or like a Scotch-Brite pad and rub and get some of these little nubbins off that are just remnants here on the flesh side versus the grain side. You can get those off, and that helps this be finished a little bit better. Do you need to finish the inside of your leather? No, you don't. Does this feel good against your skin? Not necessarily. It does help it fit. It gives you a little bit of friction and other things like that. But again, this is something that's going to get worn and wear out. Even just rubbing on it right here, you can see that we're kind of tearing it up and tearing it apart. So you can use sandpaper. You can use other things after you sand it and things like that. Get it wet. Rub it with the flat side of your slicking tool, whatever it may be, and that'll get you taken care of there for that edge. But that makes things last really, really well, really, really nice because it puts that slick edge on. And now, as things glide across it or bump into it, it's not going to give you any kind of a problem. If, like we talked about before, if you're going to put it on top of another piece, and we have it here, I would still slick that edge. What you'd want to do is run your beveling tool down it.
And when you get a second, Cien, you did have a raised hand. Was your question answered?
Sure.
Sorry, was that for me? Yeah, I had my hand up a moment ago. So I just kind of wanted to mention I have a friend who does like professional leather as well, and I remember the one thing he showed me with that. So I think the wooden tool's like a burnisher, right, for burnishing.
Yeah, your burnishing tool or slicking tool. Mm-hmm.
Right, because it's like heating it up. And just one tip that he had was that you can like put that on a drill and like mount the drill, or
Yep.
if you have like a lathe or something as a way to, if you're doing like armor, like a lot of it, because otherwise it does take like quite
Oh,
a
it
while to get
does.
a real edge on it.
It does. I've got I have one mounted on my drill press. I've got a drill press. Not everybody's got a drill press, but I've got one mounted on my drill press that runs really, really nice. If you aren't quite to a drill press type status, saying, hey, I've got a drill press, you can get these tools right here, and they are actually built for a Dremel. So you can Dremel. I've used these for bigger projects, longer projects, and things that way. And you can just put your Dremel in a clamp. Before I got the one for the drill press, I got these and used these because it was cold outside and I didn't want to go where the drill press was. But I could mount this on a clamp on my bench, and so I just mounted my Dremel there. And you can vary that speed, make it really nice, and it is just that friction. So good point there. It is just a matter of saying, hey, these work really well. I love this little guy. I use this by hand sometimes too. for holes. So most buckles and straps, you're only going to use one hole for it, and that hole is going to get worn on a little bit. But the other buckles, the other holes, you can use this to burnish a little hole that's going to be left open. There, most of your other holes you don't there because they're going to be filled with a rivet or filled with a screw post or anything else. But these work really well. The one in the lathe works really well. You can actually take this guy, and the end of it is small enough. If you get it nice and square in a drill, you can put this just in a hand drill, just your DeWalt regular drill, and have it there. You need some way you'll need to clamp it to something or do whatever else. But again, just if we're looking at trying to do this on a budget and do things that way, before I got my sewing machine, before I got other things like that, I hand sewed everything. My leather is actually, I bought 8-ounce leather and put it together. So I've got 2 layers of leather. Everything is hand sewn on. It's like 120 yards worth of hand sewing, all saddle stitched. Just huge amounts of sewing. I hand slicked everything on the sides of it, things like that. I really feel like, hey, getting the taste, getting the beginning, if you know, hey, what it's like to hand sew something, what it's like to hand slick something, it does put you in a little better spot to really, really appreciate the one that plugs in your Dremel and lets you go a lot faster and do things that way. But it helps you understand that process. Also, if you don't have it helps if you don't have the machine set up at that moment. Hey, things aren't set up. It's in the back of the shop, or it's someplace that gosh, I've got to do that. I've got to get things set up and set the Dremel up, get the clamp out, do all these things just to do this little tiny piece. Hey, I'm making a little piece for somebody. At that point in time, hey, maybe I don't fill everything out. I pull out this hand slicker that's right sitting in the middle of my desk. Poof, I've got it slicked if it's a little tiny piece. So it depends on what you're doing there to really help get that taken care of. But that slick edge is that important that, hey, you're going to put it on that. I've seen them connected to bench grinders. There, in fact, Tandy sells a bench grinder that's super expensive that is built. It's got a sanding drum on one side and a bunch of different slicker sizes on the other. But it's a super expensive bench grinder there, because you can get a bench grinder for not very much at like Harbor Freight, and it's not a big deal to do. So their tools and equipment are something that we, as you're getting started, don't be overwhelmed by, hey, I've got to have that in order to do this. There, you can make a nice looking set of armor, with $120 worth of tools. And then you're going to spend the rest of it on the other stuff that you're doing. If we're going to cut something in and say, hey, we're going to do this. If we cut the dry leather like this, we don't get very much cut. If we turn around, if we look at that, that cut is there. We don't want to cut all the way through the leather because that'd be counterproductive. What kind of time are we at right now?
We have 10 minutes, and WM has his hand raised again.
Sure.
Yeah, hi. Salt, by the way, is usually what folks refer to me as. But I just had, you just touched on 2 things that I've been having like questions around. One is like, where do you source armor weight leather? And like, it sounds like you can double up and sew together is one answer. And then the other question is about like hole punching, and I don't know. I mean, I assume like, yes, you kind of want the right size, but is there maybe a reason to go a little under and then have the leather like shrink around it, or is that not what you want? Or I mean, because leather does have some of those types of properties. Just how do you like select hole sizes, for instance?
Sure. I like the whole size as I put the item in. Like if I've got a screw post here. If we've got something, if we try to push this into leather that's too small, you can stretch it out and you can get it in there, but it's a whole bunch of work. It's easier to punch the hole the right size, especially with screw posts. That may be a little bit big for things. This one is probably the size for it. So if we go a little too big, as we can see here, this guy is too big for this, and it's going to wobble around, and that's going to wear, and it's going to pull on the leather, depending on what kind of stress that post is going to have, or what that rivet's going to have on it. You don't want to go too big. The right size will pop right through, and it'll hold itself in. I mean, you can't. You have to push on it to get it back out. The right size is usually your best situation, because then it's not going to drag, it's not going to pull, and give you problems. If you go a size too small, like these here are probably the next size down, that's you can get it in there. You can stretch the leather out and stretch the leather around it, but it's a lot of work to get in. And so if I'm gonna choose, hey, how do I spend my time? I'm not gonna spend my time fighting with every rivet or every screw post to get in. Punch the hole the right size and have it in there, and it's gonna sit just right. It's usually not gonna stretch or bend too much. The guy that actually made the armor here the other day had Chicago screws that were this big. He had punched his holes. He had a double punch, where he'd punched it in one spot and then moved over a little bit, so it was kind of a little figure eight. And his question to me the other day at practice was, "Hey, why did this pull out? Can you tell me why this pulled out?" I said, "Well, you've got one problem there, and that's you punched the hole big enough that it shouldn't fit through, but it does because you're bending it. It's kind of like putting a coin through a slit in a piece of paper." It's that same kind of thing. So make sure you're really accurate with those hole punches. If you need to punch another hole, it better be over a little bit to check it and make sure that things are there. This is actually a practice or study piece that I did. I hadn't done this particular scale for a little while, so I sat down. This is for my own personal quiver. There I sat down and practiced. And you can see, hey, I made some mistakes right here. I wasn't getting really accurate. I was getting in there as a kind of a little bit of a double punch, and it gets a little better and a little better. And hey, the finished product is better because I practiced. This has turned into, I've picked up a couple of other new tools, and it's turned into, oh, hey, what does that look like? That'll be fun to use. So for your second question, I hope that answers your question on holes. Make them the right size. If it is a question of sourcing leather for armor grade, you can go 8 ounce and sew it together. It's a lot of sewing. You can also rivet it together. Sewing looks a lot better. Sewing's super sexy, but the rivets work too. You can punch some rivets, throw some rivets in. 100 rivets aren't very expensive, and you can rivet a bunch of stuff together and have it work out fine. It just needs to be that layer for it so that you have that full thickness. That's something that possibly should change within Belgium, because when you get into the 12, 14, and 16 ounce leathers, it is kind of intimidating. It's intimidating to work. I remember the first thing I ever cut out with it and thought, oh my gosh, this takes forever to cut. I'm never going to be able to shape this or bend this or do this at all otherwise. And so I put that leather away and went ahead and used some lighter leather for that project. It's kind of an interesting thing. Now I use that leather all the time there, because I've learned how to deal with it, and I practiced with it and everything else. Sourcing that, I get almost everything from Tandy. I've gotten some stuff from Longsdale. I've gotten some stuff from Frog Jelly. There are a lot of online sources to do that. You just want to look in and make sure that you're getting veg tan. 12 ounce leather is going to be minimum to get to that 4.7 millimeters. It'd be really cool if that was 4 millimeters, because then 12 ounce leather would always work. But 12 to 14 ounce leather usually works out well. As you're buying leather, realize that they're giving you that gradient, that 12 to 14 ounce leather, because leather is not a perfect material. It's something that is thicker in some parts and thinner in other parts. So the thickest part is going to be the top end of that. So 14 being the top, 12 being the thinnest part of it. If you get 14, 16, then the 16 is going to be the thickest and the 14 is going to be there. If you want to be really, really certain about it, then that is the place to go, is to have the 14, 16. Just make sure it's the thinnest is going to be the thickness that you need for it. Or 8-ounce leather works really, really well, doubled up. And you can do some cool stuff with that because it's usually nicer tooling leather too. A utility side works really well. It's not pretty leather. It'll have a lot of blemishes in it. They're usually not high grade, but a utility side works really well is what most places call it. You can also get what's called a sole bend is going to be your thickest, heaviest leather. It is actually not bending of soles to be a sole bender, but it is actually a what they use for the soles of shoes there. But that is thick, heavy leather that can be kind of intimidating the first time you do it. One of the secrets to making leather do what you want it to is get it wet. And then you can usually bend it, play with it. It cuts easier when it's wet. You can also make really, really quick mistakes if you're cutting wet leather. So cutting dry is usually your best bet on getting it what it needs to be. We're probably close to time.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes left. If there are any more questions, feel free to pop them in. Chris, if you are collecting blanket points for the blanket competition for any group, if you'll let us know which group you would like that to go to. If there are no more questions, we'll say thank you very much, Cien. And you also have a class at 2, I believe.
Yeah.
1, 2.
At 2 o'clock we'll make something.
Yeah. And we have a lunch break right now. We also have an after class discussion area if you think of more questions later.